Your consciousness is sent back to when you were at age 15, and you maintain all of your current knowledge and experience. What do? Oh man, I have a whole ass plan for such things. Background: I've been disabled since I was 4. T1 diabetes and being on the spectrum sucked ass, combined with back then, 90s, learning disabilities not being as accepted at my schools, so they tried to forcibly correct me and it went horribly wrong. So, thing the first, high school, I wouldn't let it stress me out and push me to the breaking point like it did. I almost died in HS because things got so bad with my T1 diabetes and it spiraled so far out of control that it almost took me out. We're not fucking doing that shit. The walk for the diploma isn't worth it. If I fail, I fail. We make this up in community college. Fuck high school. Thing the second, fight harder to get your disability benefits. My mom had representative payee status over me and it kinda fucked everything up, so I had to go to work for a retail job that didn't give a singular fuck that I was diabetic. I ran my sorry ass into the ground so hard that I'm still cleaning up the mess almost 10 years after I got fired. If anything, this is what utterly fucked me, and this is the thing I would change the most. I finally got my benefits way too late into that job, and by the end of it I was making so little at that job that I was 90% living on disability anyway. I should have quit and salvaged what I could, but I am dumb. Thing the third, fuck the job once disability is done. Go the fuck to college. Community college would have been easily affordable, and where I live there are plenty of grants and waivers. I should have taken advantage of them. Again, I am an idiot. Fourth, and definitely not least, see a fucking dentist. That's another thing older me had to clean up, and it wasn't pretty. I'm in a good place now. Bless my soul for helping cover the dental bills because disability sure fucking didn't. But man, I could have saved myself a ton of hurt down the line if I wasn't so scared of the dentist. I post this in hopes that maybe someone is currently in my situation, reads this, and knows to get the fuck out or advocate for oneself before things get so bad that older you is going to have a right mess on their hands to clean up. It's not fun. Well, knowing me, I don't make the stupid choices I made for the past 31 years, but also knowing me, I would make totally different stupid choices, because I'm human. Just because I could now avoid the traps I had fallen into back then, this does not mean I would not fall into different traps, but hopefully the sum total would be a better life. I know there are career changes I would make, there are financial decisions I would do a better job with. For instance, on the day I graduated college, Apple stock sold for 15 cents a share. If I had bought $5,000 worth of Apple stock that day, I could sell that today for $4.6 million. So there's that. Save more money from that part-time job. Invest it, don't date yet, actually finish university, and probably get more therapy earlier. Invest in Bitcoin when it's tiny. Travel even more than I did. Spend more time with my grandparents before they passed away. I'd probably still want to be dating the person I'm seeing now, though, which is impressive considering how much stuff I want to change. Watch me regret this comment in a day, a week, or a year. Haha. Rock and fucking roll. I'd immediately get myself a guitar, form a band, and try my damnedest to make it on the road. Live my teens, 20s and the 90s the right way. A few years later, I'd also alert the FBI to a certain group of Saudi assholes taking commercial pilot lessons. I'd also alert any news media who might take it seriously. I'd do anything to stop 9/11, and maybe, things could still be like they were, when we could for real be proud to be American. Yeah, all youngsters really don't realize how different things used to be before those towers fell, and also obviously Amazon and Apple stock. Later on I'd build rigs to mine Bitcoin, and maybe I'd have to arrange for a young Harvard twerp named Zuckerberg to have an unfortunate accident. Facebook did almost as much damage to us as 9/11. cherish seeing Led Zeppelin in 1977 more, even though it wasn't a very good tour for them. Cherish seeing Star Wars for the first time again, even though I've seen it many times. It would be fun to see it with an audience again who had zero knowledge of Star Wars. Invest all my savings in a little, unknown group of guys out in California starting up a new venture in personal computers. Out of a garage. I'd tell my parents it's just a fruit company or something. I take my little brother to the hospital because he has a tumor that no one knows about. I tell my dad that he shouldn't sell his company because we end up homeless. I buy Bitcoin. I live with my family and appreciate them. I go to an IHOP many years later and find the waitress. I ask her on a date. Hopefully I can keep both my families this time. Everyone saying what they'd do better while I'd be having a total mental breakdown. Can you imagine going back to living with your parents, waking up at 6 a.m. to get a bus to be in class at 8 a.m., taking exams again, having to study all over again? I have nightmares about this. Please no, I'd rather stay an adult please. I think the truth is, if this were to happen, the results would turn out to be bittersweet. It's easy to solve past problems in our minds, and maybe those solutions would actually work in a time travel scenario. But life adopts a new, unexpected situations always show up, so I'd probably end up running into another problem further down the line and regretting a different decision. There's a lot of comments in this thread about taking advantage of financial decisions. Maybe I'd become a Bitcoin billionaire, but who's to say that I wouldn't suffer the same fate as lottery winners? Taxes, bankruptcy, fake friends, etc. All the fun of those hypotheticals vanished the moment my daughter was born. I know that realistically I'd never be able to recreate the exact circumstances to have the same child, but I'd have to put everything I have into trying. Doing otherwise is unimaginable. It would be years and years of stress and planning and dread knowing that I'm essentially doomed to fail at the only thing that matters, the one thing I'm trying desperately to achieve, along with the constant feeling that I'm being an idiot to pour myself into something that will never work, and the guilt of even contemplating giving up. And there's basically no good ending. Eventually I either have a child who's clearly not her and try desperately not to burden them with my grief, or I have a child who might be her and I spend the rest of my life struggling to deal with thoughts of is it really her, without my preoccupation messing her up. Or I give up and live feeling like I abandoned my daughter and erased her from existence, and God, my poor wife in all of this. Basically, what if you got to read your life? Used to be a fun thought experiment. Then I met the love of my life and adopted a couple cats and it got more emotionally complicated. Then I had a perfect baby girl and imagining this scenario became like imagining hell. People here are getting rich or saving the world, but I'm 100% using this as an opportunity to deploy all the clever responses I came up with hours later in response to various people. I still have a lot of them memorized thanks to my brain's love of reviewing stupid things I've said and done over the decades late at night, so I feel pretty prepared. Made sure I started my relationship with my soon-to-be wife when I first met her instead of waiting a year. Would have worn my mother about her lungs so she would still be here with me. Outside of those major changes, probably would have made some investments in Bitcoin, Dodge and GameStop and helped my family out with the gains. Go straight to my room, blast Powerman 5000 from my humongous CD player, and bury my head in my pillow while I cry. High school was a living hell for me and living with my stepmom was a living hell, but after I came to terms with my situation, I'd find my dad, who died last year, hug him tight, then go and do the same with my grandparents. Then after that I might cut down a bully or three. I've gotten surprisingly good at insults and standing up for myself in my old age. Oh, and have a DQ blizzard. I wasn't lactose intolerant at 15 and holy shit do I miss blizzards. Try to be Jeff's friend. Jeff was a really big deal in middle school. We went to different elementary schools, so I never even heard of him prior to middle school, but as soon as I got to middle school his name was going around the school a lot and it became clear he was a big deal. Jeff was the toughest guy in our grade, the most athletic, the best looking, and the coolest according to both the guys and the girls. The guys wanted to be his friend, and if they weren't, then they were wary of him because of how tough he was, and he gave off that vibe that he wasn't someone to make angry. All the girls loved him, and he was making out with girls and going out with them all the time. He even went out with at least 2 girls a year ahead of us in school, and one of them was the most popular girl in her grade. This was basically unheard of, but he did it. He was in my class in the 6th grade, and it became pretty clear that despite his coolness, toughness, and ability with the girls at a young age, Jeff had some problems and couldn't control himself that well. He would act out in funny ways by causing mischief and trouble, but he would also act out in less funny yet troubling ways by doing things like smoking cigarettes on school grounds with other troubled kids, and he would occasionally get physical with any guy dumb enough to piss him off. Because of this, he got detentions and suspensions. That year our class had a field trip to some place that I don't remember, but I do remember the bus ride to and from the trip. Jeff and I were on the same bus, and for some reason still unknown to me he decided to sit next to me. On the way there he was talking to me about different things, and since I thought he was a bully and tough and I was afraid of him, I just was nice and would listen and then follow up with questions and try to interact with him, and he seemed to be cool with that. Then at some point he started talking about his home life and his dad, and he said that his dad would hit him upside the head. When he told me this, he had his eyes averted and sort of looking down, and he said it kind of like it was a joke, but I could tell that he was upset by it and was trying to play it off cool and by acting like it wasn't some big deal. On the bus ride back to school we stopped at some place, and there were these vending machines that some kids were getting snacks out of. I went to get myself a snack and a drink, and I got my drink, but something happened when I tried to get my snack. I can't remember what it was exactly. It may have been that I thought I had more money than I did, and when I went to get my snack I came up short for money, or it could have been that the machine ate my money. Whatever happened, I couldn't get my snack and I was upset because I was pretty hungry. Without asking him or saying anything, Jeff just stepped in front of me and said, "I got you," and put $1 in the machine for me so I could get my snack. Then we sat next to each other on the way back to school after that. At some point during that year we had a substitute teacher for our class, and some kids were acting out and I was laughing because it was funny. Our substitute was a middle-aged woman and she was not happy at all. She was yelling at us to shut up and knock it off, and she physically grabbed me by the shoulders and then started pushing me downward into my chair and desk, and I was frightened by it. I was scared and didn't know what to do, and she was hurting me. When class ended, Jeff grabbed me by the arm and said, "Come on, we're going to the office," and he basically pushed me and pulled me down the hallway to the principal's office. I wasn't going to say no to the guy in a million years because I was afraid of him. We get to the office and he does all the talking and tells the principal what happened while I just sit there in silence, nodding each time that the principal asks me if what Jeff is saying is true. See, the principal had and would go on to have numerous run-ins and issues with Jeff because Jeff could not behave and kept getting into trouble way too often. The principal was wary of him and didn't trust him much, and I suppose he had good reason not to. However, I still remember the concerned look on his face when Jeff was telling him what happened. When Jeff was done talking, we left the office and the principal said he'll look into the incident, and that's all I remember. I figured that Jeff was just using me to act out and cause trouble or give the principal a headache and having to deal with him yet again. I was too afraid of Jeff to say to him that I didn't want to go to the office, so what happened, and that was that. Jeff was expelled from school early in the 8th grade. Word spread around the school quickly because the kid was such a big deal. I don't remember why he got kicked out exactly or what the final straw was. He basically disappeared in 2003 and I never saw him again. Or so I thought. He was off my radar for years and I had heard that he got kicked out of his second school after he got kicked out of ours, and then in high school he got kicked out of a Catholic school and then wound up at a pretty crappy public school. I didn't know at the time whether he even finished high school or not. In the fall of 2007 I was a senior in high school and I was hanging around at a friend's house after a party ended on the weekend. Seemingly out of nowhere, Jeff shows up with a guy I used to be friends with in earlier years. I hadn't seen Jeff since 2003. He was still big, looked about 6'3", and still had that kind of socially and physically dominant way about him. He was joking around with the guy he came with and he playfully pushed him on the shoulder after making a joke and the guy almost lost his balance and fell over. Jeff just couldn't help it. Being the alpha male and dominant is how he always was. I was sitting on the couch with my friend and the guy who hosted the party, and then the guy who almost got pushed over smiled at Jeff a bit and said, "You remember, insert my name here," and Jeff stared at me for a few seconds. I definitely didn't look exactly like I did in middle school, but he stepped closer to me and looked me in the eyes and put his hand out to shake my hand but didn't say anything to me. Then he went back to drinking the beer he had and joking around. That's the last time I saw him before he died. Jeff died a few years ago, I think from a drug overdose. Heroin probably. He was 27. I determined that at some point his father, who was abusive and likely violent with him when he was a kid, left the family, likely when Jeff was about 15 or 16. It looked like Jeff and his mom and little sister had to leave our town and they wound up in a crummier, more run-down area. He fell into the druggy crowd in later years after he was kicked out of middle school, and I suppose this shouldn't have been surprising because his older brother overdosed on heroin and died when me and Jeff were in the 7th grade. I remember that going around the school at the time and people talking about it in whispers. It took me until I was 30 years old to put my brief yet meaningful moments with Jeff together. I went my whole life thinking that he was the school bully and I was afraid of him, yet I realized eventually that I never saw him bully anyone and that he never bullied me. I remembered our time on the bus together and our trip to the office, but I couldn't connect the dots at the time. Now I realize that on the bus, Jeff was grateful that I listened to him talk about his dad hitting him, and because I was nice and good to him. When I needed help at the vending machines he had my back, no questions asked. When our substitute teacher did what she did to me, I later realized that this happened after the bus trip and vending machines day, because I was nice and good to him. When he saw what the teacher did to me, he didn't decide to use me as a way to act out and start trouble. He was just trying to help me because he apparently cared and was concerned. When I saw him after that party was over in high school, he truly did remember me, and he remembered those moments we had together where we had each other's backs in the 6th grade. He could have just said "What's up" when the other guy asked him if he remembered me, but instead of that he moved towards me and shook my hand, because even after years of having nothing to do with each other, those 6th grade memories came back to him that night, but not to me at the time. At 30, I put it all together. I'm truly sad that he's gone, and when we were kids I would have never thought that I would say that about him, feel that way about him, or that he would die young. The guy was the biggest deal and the last person I would have thought wouldn't make it in life, but sadly his demons and troubles took him away. Once I understood Jeff, I began thinking of him as a legend of my childhood. Recently I realized that calling Jeff a legend, while accurate and true, doesn't truly explain and express what he means to me. In a life filled with much hurt and pain doled out to me by the people whom I used to call friends and family, as well as abuse dished out by others out there, Jeff is one of the only people whose friendship, goodness, and memory is not tainted by time and by how people eventually began to treat me over time. All that he ever was good to me, respectful, kind, decent, caring, supportive, fearless, empathetic, friendly, and true. He was never anything bad to me for as long as I knew him, and he's the best friend that I never had. That's why calling him a legend doesn't quite express what he is to me all these years later. He's not a legend, he's my hero.